Hello, and thank you for joining us for the SMAX user group today. I'm Brendusha Kevorkian, your host, and I have with me Carl Van Kunut. And for today, we have a spotlight session, Integration Engine Enhancements, we released in the SMAX 24.2 release. So with that, let me share my screen. Okay, and Carl, please confirm you can see my screen.
I can.
Okay, good. So with that, let's move on. So SMAX user group, if you're here, you're probably familiar with our setup. We have three types of sessions: feature spotlight, where we do a deep dive into a specific SMAX capability, like the session today; release readiness, where we review an upcoming release and share the highlights; and then occasionally we have office hours, which is just an open session to ask questions and engage with the product experts. So just the agenda for today, we'll do a quick update on the latest patches, and then we'll move into the main topic, which is the Integration Studio. So just on the 24.1 release train, so that's 24.1 and 23.4. The latest patch is patch 2. This is not new, has been released a while ago. So I think we talked about it in the previous session as well. Some fixes on SMAX audit, and if you apply it, make sure you also look at the additional steps from the previous releases. On 24.2, we just released patch 1 it's a few days ago. So it includes a couple of new features. So we recommend taking a look at the release notes, and then as well various bug fixes for the different components. So don't forget to take a look at the additional components you need to deploy if you're using the standalone version, and then as well check the release notes for additional tasks to perform post-patch update. Just a note, if you're a SaaS customer, please check the support notification schedule, right, for the exact timing, because it depends on the farm upgrade schedule. So some farms have already been upgraded to 24.2, others will be in the next couple of weeks, and in that case they'll come with patch 1 directly installed. So with that, we'll move into the Integration Studio enhancements. Let me stop the sharing, and I'm gonna hand over to Carl for the presentation. Okay, well, you can go ahead.
Share. Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this is it's a recorded demo of some of the new features. So any questions you can just type in the comment section, and I'll maybe pause it after the first part to see if we can answer any questions anybody has. And again, this is it's a technical demo because I'll be reviewing a lot of the new rules and how you add them and what they do. So, okay, shall start. Mute myself.
Today, we're going to review the new Integration Studio features available on the 24.2 SMAX release. There are 4 new features that we'll be discussing. The first is the ability to update multiple entities at the same time in bulk instead of one at a time. This is now available on both the Manage Person API and EMS API. The Integration Studio now supports accessing the header data in the payload response. We'll also review the Integration Studio scenario that supports incident exchange with Jira. We're going to start with the bulk action with the Manage Person API. So when you add this rule, you'll see it under the local options, and notice the new v3-bulk in the description. So this is how you can distinguish it between the older option where you can only update one at a time. When we add the action, there are a few things to understand. The first thing is in the input section, the user properties field. This field is going to contain an array of data, not just a single variable. So the array needs to be properly formatted in JSON. In this example I provided, you can see what it's going to look like. In this case, there are 2 user entities included in the array, and you can see that I've included the UPN the Managed Person API requires. In the operation field, you can see the same values you would see doing a Postman update with the create or update in the operation. One thing to note is that there could be a maximum of 50 users updated. Now, in this case, we need to make sure that we don't include more than 50 in our array. The logic needs to be built in to limit the number of users added into the array to 50. I'm going to demonstrate the new rule using one of the use cases it was designed for. So, company ABC needs to convert a large number of people from users to contacts. To keep this example simple, we're just going to say that all members of the accounting group need to be converted. We're going to create a new scenario using our action that allows us to send users in bulk to the Managed Person API. Sending users in bulk as opposed to one at a time is a far more efficient way of updating it. The scenario will update 50 users at a time. We'll make sure that each batch of 50 is completed before starting the next batch or exit on error. And we'll also limit the number of people that are going to be updated to 200 per day by starting the rule with a scheduler. From a high-level point of view, this will be the flow of our use case. So we'll review each of these rules one by one, but just to get an idea of what we're doing, we're going to start by preparing our data. We'll then loop through a series of 50 updates, and eventually we'll exit once we've reached our 200 people. So now we'll review each one of the actions. Starting with our prepare data rule, in this section, we're going to define the variables we need in our scenario. There are a few important things, including the name of the array that's going to contain the UPNs of all the users we need to update. We're also going to include information about how many users per update we want to include and how many times we're going to run our loop to get to the 200 users per day we want. We're also going to include the current loop variable that will tell us which loop we are currently in. Once we've done 4, we'll stop. So in this case, the number of loops we're going to run is 4, and we're going to update 50 people per update. We're now going to look at our do and to rule. So this rule runs until an exit condition is met. So in this case, as we know from above, we set our current loop value at 1, and then we set our number of loops to 4. So we can see once the current loop has exceeded the number of loops, our action will exit. Now, we can see later in the rules that I've added here where we increment the number of loops and see why our do until will stop. So we can see it's going to do until, and it's going to run 9 different rules. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to click on this section, and we're going to look at all the rules we've added. So the very first thing we're going to do is we are going to get our list of user UPNs from SMAX. So we're going to query the person records, and we are going to look for the organizational group of 10912, which happens to be the accounting group. Our layout, we're going to return our IDs and our UPNs. And if we look at the size, we can see we've added the updates.users per update. So above, we defined this as 50 users. We're going to then run the query and put the output into this person UPN array. Now we need to use this information. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a apply to each rule. We're going to move through each element within the array, and we're going to extract the UPN of the person. If we look here, we can expand our get UPN of person rule, where we see we're defining a key of UPN, and we're extracting each individual user's UPN from our query. And after we have extracted this UPN, we're going to add it to our array that we defined earlier that's going to contain the 50 users that we want to update. So if I open this, this is a change data rule, and you can see I have selected the updates.bulk update array, which is the array I defined earlier that's going to contain all of the data that I want to update. So we're now going to expand the value so you can see what I've added. So you'll recognize it. So any update for a user to the managed person. You can see we need to include the UPN, and then we're going to include the things that we're going to update. So in this case, we're actually going to clear out the value of organizational group to remove the user from accounting. We're then going to replace both the role and group with this empty set, which will set both of them to null. So no role and no group. So you can also see this is maybe an easier way to view the content of what I'm adding for each element of the array. So notice UPN organizational rule. We also have to include this $sign at the end of the update. Okay, it's at this point we can actually use the arrays we've been building and we can send the information to the managed person API. So here's my next section, managed person API bulk. So this is where we're actually going to send this payload to the managed person API, and then it's going to go and update all of the users. So we can see if we scroll down a little, our input, our user properties, this is like we'd seen above. This is our array of the defined information. So the UPN, including the changes we want to make to each user. Now, if we scroll around a little bit, we can see another important thing. So after this runs, we're going to receive a job ID, and we can then use this job ID to tell us when managed person has finished running the 50 user updates. So we're going to scroll down a little more. Added in the last release, we can see we have this get job status. So we can then use that job ID, and we're going to query. And once that job status is completed, we know that our 50 users have been updated. So if we look here, I have a condition. So the condition says clean result job status, bulk status is running. So that's going to mean as long as the job ID is running, I will continue to query, waiting for it to finish. Once it's finished in status done, then it'll advance to the next action. So this is the step where we had got the job status. So next, one more step that we need to do, and that is we actually need to set the operation to delete. Now, this isn't deleting the person record. This is just going to be deleting the flag that indicates that the person is a user as opposed to a contact. So we're going to use our same bulk update array, only our operation is going to be delete. So we're going to delete the user flag, and it'll be the same kind of concept. We're going to then pull the job ID and then use our managed person API get job status to tell us when all of those updates have occurred. And the final thing we're going to do is we're going to increment the loop count. So as you know from earlier, we defined a couple things. One is the current loop and the other was the number of loops. So as this happens to be our first loop through, we then want to add a 1. So we started at 1, we would now update current loop to 2. So the next time it runs, the do while knows that we have 2 loops that we're running. And then the other thing we need to do, because we updated the 50 users, we now want to reset that and clear it out because we're going to assign another set of 50 users. The next thing we want to do is we want to do some testing to make sure everything's working correctly. So what we'll do, rather than run it in the schedule, we're just going to click on the Run Scenario button. Okay. And when we look at the endpoint that stores all the information on our rules, and we can obviously see that we have had a failure. So what we'll do is we're going to look here. We know that the scenario name is bulk multi-record. Our rule, do until 200 users are updated, query SMAX to get the list of users, have obviously failed. So if we were to open up this, we can see what's going on. Now we can see we have a rule failed because the HTTP response was received. So obviously an error, a typo or something. In this case, if we examine it, we can see we have accidentally made the entity ID or the entity type persons instead of person. This caused everything to fail. So that's why we have our red failed. We need to address this in the scenario. We move back to our scenario. We can look at our rules and we can see in our query SMAX to get list of users to update. Clearly, we have made it persons instead of person. We'll save. Now we can rerun our scenario. So if we move back, we'll then click refresh, and we can see how we have a lot of green now. So what we'll do is we will scroll open, and we will see everything that we've been doing. So if we scroll down, we can find the start of the run. So as you can see, prepare data. So in this section, we're defining all of the information we need. So the number of loops, 4. We have a null set for our array. Users per update, 50. And of course, current loop, 1. Move back and then watch. We have our do until. Our first thing we do is we're going to query SMAX. If we scroll down, we can see we're querying SMAX to get our 50 people. Count 50. If we scroll down in the output, we can see be a large list of UPNs and IDs. Move up a little more, we can see our section of building the array. So if we look at a couple things, we can see where we're creating the UPN. So we can see in this case, Ian Cruz is our UPN at testing.com. We are then adding that information to our array. So we can open this and see. And here's the value that we're putting into the array. So we're seeing roles, groups. We have our properties with our UPN and our organizational group set to null. Now, if we move up, we know we're creating 50 of them. So we can probably scroll up and find where 50 have been added. So we're gonna have to refresh again. We'll move over. Okay, we can see here, we have our bulk managed person bulk update. So if we open this, now we can see the information is being sent. So we're sending the array with all of our data to the managed person API. It'll be submitted. And then of course we get what we talked about earlier. Our job ID is returned. We can see this is our job ID. Now, if we go back, we can then see our get job status. We can return it and we can see the first attempt indicated it was still running. So we know that our rule is going to keep executing until it's not running, it's done. So we'll click up here on the last one. See in this case, success. So this means our job is done, successful, and we can move on to our next loop. So we know from our rules, we'll see one more thing. So we also know we need to run additional thing, and that is removing the flag. So we can see we're going to run a second bulk. And that bulk is to update the flag. So we're going to run each one again, only with the delete command, as we know from the rule. We're going to refresh. We're going to move over. You can see it has finished. So we'll have to move down a little bit to find where it had exited. So we got our job statuses. They've hit success. And we know that we had to implement the loop count. So here we go, implement the loop count. We can scroll down. We can see that we're now in our second loop, where the next set of 50 are going to be updated. Now, the very last thing we'll do, we're going to look at the person records so we can see what we've actually done. So if we click here, we have our big list of people. I filtered on last update time today, and then we'll just randomly pick our first one in the list, who's now a contact, so we can look at history to see what's happened. And we can see, because of our scenario, we've removed the groups, we've removed the organization, the authentication type has been deleted, person status is now inactive, and person type from true to false. So this is how the conversion to a contact occurs. So if we go back to general again, contact. So this was the goal of our scenario. The very last thing we want to do is, because we don't want to overwhelm the system, we only want to run our scenario once a day. So all we're going to do, we're going to move into the schedulers. We're going to add we're going to name it. We're going to select our integration. In this case, L500, bulk multi-record. Click next. Schedule it. We're going to start, and we'll have it start. We're going to start tomorrow, which is Tuesday. We're going to run it one a day, and we don't need anything else. And we don't need to add any inputs, and we'll just save. So now our job will run once a day. Thank you. So our next topic is
Okay, just that was the first part with the managed person API. I don't know if there's any questions in the forum.
I don't see any question in the chat or in the, let me double check Q&A. Let's see, anyone who would like to ask a question live can actually just raise their hand and we'll unmute you and you can ask the question. Just give a minute. So I think we can continue, and anyways, feel free to put your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll open up again after this second part.
Another action, this time the EMS API managed record bulk update. So similar to the managed person, only this is for the EMS API, and it's available under your local system actions when you're adding your rules. So when we have selected our new action type, we can see this is what our window will look like. Now, similar to the managed person, we can see that our payload is an array. So the array is going to consist of the entities we want to update in JSON format. Now, unlike the managed person, there's no limit to the action. However, it needs to support what the EMS API supports. So, and you can see we've included a little sample array of what this would look like. So you can see in our bulk update array, we have our 3 updates. And in this case, we're changing the assigned person to a different value. So you can have numerous elements within the array, but this is what the structure needs to look like. So now we will review the scenario that we've created. So it's simpler than the previous managed person example because we don't need to worry about job IDs or things like that. Each REST call that goes to the EMS API is going to return immediately the result. So if we look here, we can see our prepared data. Now in this section, we're defining once again our bulk array. We're also defining the 2 values we care about. So we want to have a new assigned to person and an old assigned to person. So what we're going to do here is we're going to search. We're going to find all the requests that are assigned to a specific person. That's the old assigned person value. And we're going to assign it to our new assigned person value. So the next thing we need to look at, our EMS query. So in this step, what we're going to do, scroll down a little, we can see that we are going to search entity type request. And the filters we're using are the assigned to person.id. So if you saw earlier, we assigned the old assigned to person we're switching the request from. So once we search all of these, we'll gain an array of all of the request IDs, and we're going to use that later on in our scenario. When the EMS rule runs, it's going to populate this object named EMS response with the request IDs. So the next step then is to look in our EMS response request ID array and parse out all of the values that we care about. So these are all the request IDs. Then we're going to add them into our array that will be sent to the EMS API. I've zoomed in on what I have added to the value of our change data rule. As we parse each of our request IDs from the EMS query, we need to format the data so the bulk update action can consume it. In this example, we're adding the step where we get the request ID right into our change data rule. We're parsing the properties.id in the same step that we format the element we're adding to the array. We've added the entity type and ID, and we're also adding our new assigned to person value. So every ID we receive from EMS query will have its own element added to this array here. And we'll move on to our last step. So after we've populated our bulk update array, we can see where I've added the action, the EMS API managed record bulk update. So our payload consists of our updates bulk update array. The operation we're performing is an update, and then we'll capture the response in case of any errors. After we've saved, we can then run the scenario. If we move to the endpoint, we can see the result of all of the actions that we created in our scenario. So initially, we had created the prepare data action. If we scroll down, we can see where we're defining the values. We're defining our old person value and we're defining our new person value, as well as creating the bulk update array. There's also the endpoint log of the output of our query. So in this case, we can see all of the requests that had been assigned to that person. Any errors would, of course, appear here for troubleshooting. As we move up, we can see all of the rules that are changing our data to add the users to the requests. So we can see there's quite a few requests. We were to go to the last one of the change data rules that ran. We'll be able to see the full content of the array. So in this case, we can see all the values down here of the users that are going to be changed. And then lastly, we can see our action, EMS manage record bulk. This is where the entire array was submitted to the EMS API. We can scroll down. We can also see the completion status of the EMS API call. We know in this case, everything has run successfully. The next new feature we're going to review is the ability to access the header information returned when executing a REST call on a remote system. In previous releases, the header information was not available to use in a scenario. Here in our example, we're going to be querying WebEx to retrieve some licensing information that the SMAX software asset management needs. I've created an endpoint for WebEx, and I've also added the URI for the license information I want to retrieve. In the case of WebEx, the header is what stores information for paging data when there are large results. So if we look at our first field, named status code, we can click and see our code editor. Back up and we click the dot, we can see some of the different options available. In this case, we can see headers has been added, but we are going to pick status code for our first key. Now, obviously, the point of the demo, we want to see the header information. So similar to the previous, we would select headers. We will click OK. I'm also including the data response. Now we're going to save. And then we're going to run our scenario to view the results. Here we are in the endpoints. We have our WebEx endpoint, as well as all the rules that have been executed. We will click here on the most recent rule, where we can view the request details that were sent, as well as the response, and the output details we've created. If we view these using a JSON formatter, the header information is available. In the case of WebEx, the link field is what indicates the next page in sending of the data. This field can be added to one of the key value parents. We also include the data and the status code. And we'll just review a few of the other changes. So one new feature, of course, you can access and send additional fields using a business rule to the integration engine. So before you were not able to send and pass fields, now you will be able to. There's a number of scenarios where you can copy integrations, can copy scenarios, copy rules and child rules. And as we've mentioned before, there's the ability to reference response header data now. The last thing we're going to review is how to add the new JIRA scenario for incident. We'll start by adding a new connector to our JIRA integration. We'll select our connector, which has to be JIRA. Then we will select our endpoint, named JIRA. We'll save. After doing this, when we add our scenario, we'll be able to click on the drop down. And in one of the templates, we have our new incident to incident. We have our alias to our connector. We'll click save. Now, the only parameters need updating are in the settings section. Now, the service desk ID and request type are both available in your JIRA configuration. The rest of the rules are all pre-populated with the required information. Click Save. And then update the appropriate incident to test the scenario. Similar to other scenarios, if we were to click on the endpoint, we can see in this case, we have an invalid entity and entity type, indicating that the two fields and settings weren't correctly entered. So we would move back to the scenario, correct them, and retest again. Similar to other errors that may appear in the endpoints table.
All right. And that was it for the demo. I know there was a lot there. So if there's any questions on that or the new features or anything, we can do our best to answer.
Okay. I don't see any questions, but let's open up. Okay, do we have any? And stand up. No. So again, if you'd like to ask a question live, feel free to ask it. Okay. So Carl, any other maybe comments or, from your I would say projects and things you worked on, any learnings you would like to share other than what you covered here?
Well, so there's a few features that have been added over the last several releases that are very helpful. I think anybody writing these scenarios can see the auto completion of the rules as you're typing into the editor is really helpful. The new concept of the try catch on failures is something that you probably saw in my example of the managed person. I always had a try catch for error handling. So you'll be able to get out any error messages you're seeing, and if part of the scenario fails, you obviously don't want the full scenario to fail. So that's all very handy. And then as you can see also in my example, I make huge use of those endpoints during my testing. So if there's any errors that happen, the endpoints that you look at always give you the exact error message and cause of all of your errors. So I mean, those are the things you use the most when you're developing all of these scenarios. So. Yeah. And of course, all the ability now to copy paste rules. You can use your request workflow, for example, to pass variables directly to scenarios. That was added. I mentioned it a little bit. It's very helpful when you're building these things.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and definitely these are very good tips. And and the engine has evolved quite a bit, right? So obviously, if you're a SaaS customer, you'll get the latest version, or soon you'll be on the latest. But if you are on-premise standalone, we strongly recommend to upgrade to one of the latest versions, because indeed, as Carl mentioned, every release has new capabilities, and it's easier and easier to use it, right? We are adding all these new capabilities also for troubleshooting as well. Okay, good. I still don't see any other questions coming in. And no hand up. Okay. So I think with that, we will wrap up here. We are still working on organizing the next few sessions, and we'll provide up the agenda as it become available, both through the community page, but as well through the updates to the WebEx invites. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.